So to summarize what we've done today, we started building a server-side application. There were a lot of concepts there. We used a library called Express that helps us build the server-side application. We built an API, which we said is kind of a menu in a restaurant. It's an interface. It's a way for a client application to get some resources, to update them, to create them. So we create an API to get albums. We could create an API to get news, to get information about students, whatever. Um, we talked about HTTP, which is a protocol that runs the internet, since we're building web services, web APIs. There are few bits and pieces about it. The URL here, you see that we have the protocol, have the domain, we have the port number. Then we have an endpoint, a resource, which is what we use in Express, a verb to decide what we're doing, whether it's creating, getting, whatever. We send a request, we get back a response. In our code, the way we handle this request is through these handlers. So we define what the endpoint is, whether it's a slash, in this case, slash albums with something. We talked about having these parameters, and then we can use them and access them with request.params.album or request.params.whatever name it is. We used a couple of response codes. 200 is the default one when everything is okay. 404 when we didn't find something. 201 for created, when we created a resource. And the next steps for this on the node side, the server side, that we can now we just save to a database, so to an object in memory, but we can connect to a database and save in a database, retrieve from a database, be able to query more in a more sophisticated way. Maybe we don't get, we have albums for more than just Beyonce. We want to get album by artist. We want to search by collection name. We can do this more and more of that, but the main idea remains that there is a client, which is a React application in this case, but can be anything, any HTML page with some Ajax, that calls our server and gets back and deals with some data, some information from the server. So what we'll be building in the next few weeks with Node is server-side applications that do things more and more, that will get more and more sophisticated and more complicated. So to clarify that the terminology again, this is the backend. We've been doing front end so far. So when people talk about front end developers, there are people like talking about developers who are mainly working with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in the browser. And then backend is, in our case, is JavaScript, but in the server in Node. So here I cannot do something like document.get element by ID, because we don't have a document, we don't have a DOM. In the same time, in the client, I cannot talk to a database because or I cannot write to a file or read from a file, because the browser will not allow me to do that. So even though the language is JavaScript, when we're using it in the client, we have more restrictions than when it's on the server with Node.js. So we are now the backend development. When people talk about a full stack developer, it's normally they mean someone who does both front end and back end.